I wanted to honor innovators, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and those with limitless attitudes. Welcome to Blue Sky. This episode of Blue Sky is sponsored by The Vanguard, the definitive online community for defense and aerospace leaders and innovators to grow, communicate, and build capacity in our defense industrial base. With curated discussion forums, exclusive networking, a desktop and mobile app, and unique access to working sessions and AMAs with top leaders in the defense and aerospace industries, The Vanguard is the next generation career accelerator for those looking to break into or make an impact on the defense and aerospace sectors. Join the ranks of the Vanguard today with a free trial and enter coupon code Blue Sky, that's one word, Blue Sky, at the link in this posting.
Preschool's hard because we can't go every day because we live so far away from town, and a lot of places around here don't want you to only go 2 mornings. They want you to come 4 days, or at least pay for 4 days. Perfect. Do you know where your boots are?
No, they're in my room.
Okay.
I want my snow boots.
You want your snow boots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go right to the... I better take you, honey. I don't want you to go out there when I can't see you. All right. Richard, I'll be right back. I'm going to go take him to the shop. Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
Hey, hurry. Go get your snow boots. Having a move in the middle of all this was not planned, but I'm glad we're back here. So,
And what prompts that move? Is that it's a seasonal thing? Like you have to
no, this was a disaster is what prompted this move. Bert got asked, he got offered a job. He wasn't looking in March, and it was supposed to be awesome. And it wasn't. It was awful. So then the guy that they hired to run the ranch that Bert was running, he didn't like it here. And one of Bert's guys who he hired called him and said, "Hey, Carlos is quitting. Would you consider coming back?" And Bert said, "Yeah, if they pay me what I've been getting paid," which is, we thought it was never going to happen. But they missed him and wanted him back. And so we were already looking for another job, and we thought, this place isn't perfect, but the devil you know. We love this house. This is a great house. And that was part of the issue with the other place, was they said they had housing and they were building housing, and then their solution, what they actually came up with, was not a place we were going to live. So we figured this was a better choice for our kids. You know, they went back to their old school. So we'll stay here until either a really awesome opportunity pops up, or until we have enough clients that we don't need that we can buy a house and do our own thing. So yeah, we're happy here. We like it here. The owners, he's not the worst. He's just super cheap, like really cheap. And we live at the top of a mountain, but it's very pretty, even if the weather sucks for a good portion of the year. So
that terrain, does it change how you manage your cattle? Do you have to get different kinds of cattle versus where you were?
Yeah. I just posted a video. You commented on it at the high altitude sale. We have to buy, I need to share I did a post about PAP testing. But cattle at high altitudes, certain cattle are prone to high altitude disease, which is basically pulmonary hypertension. And it is heritable. It's 30% heritable at least. And so we buy low PAP bulls, because there's a score you get when you run a catheter from their jugular into their heart. And it takes a reading. And if it's above a certain cutoff, we don't have those animals come here. and we pap test all of our replacement heifers because this herd, before we moved here a couple years ago, the herd was really mismanaged, and we had a lot of calves because it's fatal. There's no cure for it. The only cure is that you take them to a lower elevation, which we can do because there's another division of this ranch where we winter our cattle, and it's quite a bit lower. But by the time they're expressing symptoms and you get them down, usually it's too late. Usually they're already dead because it's once you can tell that they're sick, it's and we call it brisket. That's the colloquial term because like in humans, when someone has pulmonary hypertension, they swell and they can't get that fluid off. And so all that fluid in a cow collects in their brisket, which is the dangly part between their front legs, and they drown. That's how they die. It's awful. So we really don't like that. We really don't want it. So we've Bert's management and my bulls have really, really improved our death loss. The summer before we got here, they lost at least 50 calves to pap, which for a herd this herd's been here for 25 years. They shouldn't have a problem with it, but they've had a bunch of people that don't know how to manage it. And that's kind of our wheelhouse. We've been dealing with high altitude herds for a long time. So high altitude bulls and cold weather cattle. We don't have any like eared genetics here. We have an Angus cross is what we run here. So they get nice and furry.
It's all determined by genetics. It's nothing like that cattle can acclimate to over time.
No, nope. And it's because with pap, it's just because they score high doesn't necessarily mean that they'll have a problem, and it doesn't mean their kids will have a problem, calves, but it's a higher chance that they will. Some breeds are less predisposed. Like before we understood pulmonary artery pressure and high altitude disease, most people in the high country bought Hereford bulls because Hereford bulls, for whatever reason, are less susceptible to high altitude disease. Now with the power of genetics, the problem with Herefords is that they're going to throw red calves, and not everybody wants red calves. We have a lot of baldy cows here, and we have some red cows, but we have a major uniformity issue. So we're trying to make our calves all look as close to the same as possible. So we use mostly the bulls that we buy from me, which are stabilizers. It's a Leachman brand, but it's a crossbred bull. So it's a great bull for commercial producers to use on especially high Angus influence cows. So that's what we use, and it's worked out really well.
Why don't people want red calves? What's the big deal there?
Black cattle make more money. You get partially, and that's not true everywhere, and that's not true for everybody, but by and large, partially because of certified Angus beef, CAB doesn't necessarily mean purebred registered Angus. It means 51% black hided, and it just has to grade. It's more of a grading guarantee. Angus has a floor on the grade, or certified Angus beef has a floor, and every animal under that brand has to grade above that floor. So it's more of a quality claim, not an actual breed claim. So, and I'm not enough of a feed yard markets person to be able to explain all of the factors, but that's one factor. And in general, for the last decade or two, buyers have been preferring black-hided cattle. And again, that's not the same everywhere, but there are trends. In the 80s, everybody was raising Charolais cattle because they grow so well. We're learning that growth is not the most important thing. Some people, that's a hurdle we're getting over in the beef industry, is understanding markets and genetics. And there's a lot of producers who do things the way they've always done it because that worked. And I was like, yeah, it worked great in the 80s when you were getting a premium for Charolais cattle, but we don't get a premium for Charolais cattle anymore. And the moms are mean. So I'd rather not have them around. We've dealt with lots of different kinds of cattle, and Charolais are not my favorite.
And where are your cattle in the supply chain? Who do you supply the cattle to? Is it straight to the table, or
No. We actually just sold our first group of calves yesterday. We sell through an auction. It's not our favorite way to do it, but that's how the owner's always done it. So that's what we do. And the guy who's bought our calves for the last 3, this will make year 3. He is a buyer for a big feed yard, and our calves will go to wheat first. Because we sell 5 and 6 weight calves, and in order to go into a feed yard, they need to be about 8 weight. So they go to a backgrounder, and our calves just happen to go onto wheat pasture this time of year. People are looking for wheat cattle that are going to grow well. And we've made a really good relationship with this buyer. So even though it goes through an auction, he's the one that buys our calves. And they did really well yesterday. We were a little worried because the futures market is doing some funny things, but it hasn't hit the cash market yet. So we'll sell another group next week and hope things hold on. Yeah.
How did you all get into ag?
My story is different from my husband's. My husband grew up semi-rural. His dad was a crop duster, and he knew he always wanted to be a cowboy. He rode bulls when he was young. He's one of those people that no matter what time or place he lived in, he would have ended up in the same job. So he went to college at Colorado State and has an animal science degree, and just always knew he wanted to be a rancher. And pretty much from when I met him when we were in college, he's always wanted to be a ranch manager. Not for the power, but because he knows ranch managers get to make change and get to do cool stuff. They also get to work longer hours and be on the phone more, but it's fine. I fell into ag a little bit. When I was in college, I went to CU Boulder, which is a hippie school. And I have an environmental studies degree, which is the hippie degree. When I was it was my junior year, one of my professors said, you should probably write a thesis, and I'm an overachiever, or I was before I had children. And so I decided to write a thesis, and there's many parts to this story. I started as a business major in college. So while I was a business major, I got a job working for the business school. I worked for the business research division at the business school, and they kept me on after I changed my major to environmental studies. And what we did was a lot of research, and we happened to be in the middle of an economic impact study of the National Western Stock Show on Denver and the surrounding area. So we walked around Denver, around the stock show with clipboards, and asked people, where they came from, how much they're spending, why they're there, how long they're staying, are they staying in a hotel, that kind of thing, to help understand the economic impact of the stock show in Denver. And while I was there, I just remembered how much I liked horses. My godmother lived in Aspen and had a good friend who ran a mountain ranch up there. So we would go and ride horses, and I've always liked horses, but what you don't understand when you're a kid is horses are ungodly expensive to have when you live in town. So I never got one, but I was like, I wonder if there's a thesis that would let me get to be around horses. So it ended up being a thesis about the relationship between environmentalists and ranchers and why they should probably they're both generally working toward the same thing, but they don't get along very well. And that was what the thesis was about. And I had to CU obviously is not an ag school. So I had to have my thesis advisor was like, yeah, you're going to need to get somebody from an ag school because none of us know anything about cattle. So I cold emailed the entire beef production department of CSU. And one guy, well, really 2 guys, but one professor emailed me back and said, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. So I went up there and he signed on to be on my advisory committee, because for your thesis you have to have professors who are making sure you're doing the right thing and are vetting your research tactics and that kind of stuff. And he said, you better see are you going to see some cows? And I was like, yeah, sure. So my mom at the time was a landman for an oil company, and like every good millennial college student, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I need to meet some ranchers. So she called one of her clients and said, hey, can my daughter, who has never lived more than a mile away from a Starbucks, come live with you? And they were like, yeah, bring her up. So I did that. I also spent a couple of days at the college farm, and that is where I met my husband for the first time. And Dr. Ahola, he's a professor. I think he's a bit of a matchmaker. He's a little sneaky. So they were breeding cows that day, and poor Bert had to show me how to breed cows. But he ended up working for a ranch right down the road from me, and that was in North Park, which is it's between Granby and Steamboat in Colorado, like way north, and there is nothing there. It's the least populated county. And so Dr. Ahola very gleefully emailed me because I didn't have a phone and said, "Hey, Bert's right down the road. You guys should hang out." And we did. So we've been together ever since. But after I graduated that December, I went back to work for that same ranch. And then Bert and I both got a job working for Sitz Angus in Montana. And that was kind of the start of us working on ranches together. So it's a long story, but that's how it happened.
Well, being from Texas, we always have the stereotype from people who are not from here, and they think we ride horses to school and stuff like that. And it's obviously not like that. The closest I've come to your side of the world, so to speak, is my mom dated a gentleman when I was a kid, and he was into quarter horses and beef. And so he had a couple of ranches. And for my birthday one year, he gave me one of his calves, not like to take home and stick in my living room, but he was going to raise the calf and then take it to auction, and he would give me the proceeds of the sale. We thought that was pretty cool. And I asked him, "Can I name the calf?" And he said, "Well, I've already named it." I said, "Okay, what's his name?" He said, "Shithead." I said, "Shithead? Why Shithead?" Because the calf would always religiously nurse from the rear. And so his mom was constantly just, shitting on his head. And so Shithead fetched me a little over $300 at auction, which was a pretty cool gift for I don't know, middle schooler, high schooler back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I got to visit his ranch in Brownwood once and just fell in love with that lifestyle. But it's never been the right time, opportunity, or cost for me to actually get into that lifestyle. So, from your perspective, is what you've done unique in the new generation of agriculture? Are there more young people getting into agriculture? What does that switching environment look like these days?
Yeah, there's a lot more. We're going to see a lot more first gen managers, owners, and employees. Probably since the 1860s, when everybody was new, because we know the cost of land is exorbitant. So you have to be pretty dang wealthy to buy the land, and a lot of family ranches are going out of business for one reason or another. And it's a very, very difficult industry to get into. The way we've done it is only one way. And we don't own cattle. So depending on who you ask, we're not actually in the business. That's one of my least favorite things that we say to people in this business is, if you don't own cattle, well, cool. We manage very large acreages and very large cow herds, and have had our hands on more cattle than a lot of family ranchers have in their whole lives, because the average herd size is 40. And we've never worked for a place with less than 1,000 cows. It's top 5% ranches, because that's who can afford to pay help and house them, right? Because housing is part of our paycheck. So, and this is one of the things I talk about the most, and not everybody wants to talk about this because it's hard to admit that this is not an industry that invites young people. You have to be pretty dang tenacious and have a lot of help to get started in this business. And there are people tell us all the time, we'll start small, buy a few. And for us, it's like, that's not what we do. We like big ranching. Big ranching is all we know. That's our niche. It's a separate skill set from managing small herds of cattle and small acreages. It's not what we do. We hope to own our own cattle someday. We don't really care if we own a ranch, to be honest, because that would require us to be way, people are like, oh, you just have to shoot for the stars. Okay, we are starting our own ranch management consulting business. And if that turns out to be a $500 million business, great. I can see how it might turn out to be a $10 million business. 500 is just for consulting for in this industry, it feels like a bit of a reach. And we don't want to, with ranches yes, it's an investment, but the cash flow is very difficult when you're also making land payments. And we're happy to just own cows and lease some ground as long as we get to own a house and a barn and an arena and have a place for our kids to come home to and help other people manage their big acreages better. But we don't do, the avenues for getting involved in agriculture are few. And like you said, there was never the right time or the right, financial aspect. One thing that's really difficult to talk about, and I don't talk about it on LinkedIn because it's too nuanced, this is a young person's industry to get involved in. This we've seen people getting involved in it in their 40s and 50s, and it's just too hard. Physically, when you're low man on the totem pole, which you're gonna be if you don't know anything, right? The work is very hard, but also the mindset of understanding that you don't know anything and you need to listen and pay attention, often to people who are younger than you. And then, when you're a ranch hand, which is where everybody starts, my first ranch hand job, I was getting paid $1,500 a month. You can't raise a family on $1,500 a month. You can't even raise a family on $3,000 a month. And that's a pretty solid, that's like a high ranch hand salary. We don't make a ton of money in this business. And if you do, it's because you're doing something else alongside. Bert often takes in outside horses. I have my own business, obviously. And that's why we're going into consulting because consulting is a lucrative business, and absentee owners who run corporations understand consulting. They understand what consultants are and how they fit into the paradigm. But it's really difficult to ask somebody who's lived a whole life and probably been fairly successful, or even if they haven't, that they have an idea of who they are and where they fit, and telling them that they're the ranch hand, even if they have the same skill set as a 20-year-old, they don't have the same mindset as a 20-year-old. And some people get along pretty well and some people do not. And interestingly, the people we have seen be most successful coming into this business as grown adults are ex-military, because they're used to not taking orders is the wrong thing, but we have a good friend, my oldest son's best friend down the road, his dad retired from the Army last year, I think, and he'll come and help us, and Bert will tell him how to do something, and that's how he will do it. And he won't get into a tizzy about it. He won't say, well, when I was in the Army, I had hundreds of men. He'll say, okay, this is how you want me to flank a calf. Perfect. Let's go. And they're tough. They haven't been sitting behind a desk chair their whole lives. This guy happened to be a ranger and trained people in ranger school. So he was like, we know that if it's going to be a cold day or a hot day, Damon's going to be fine, because it's not as bad as Afghanistan and it's not as cold as doing ski rescue ranger things. He can hack it. And there's just that attitude of, let's just figure it out. How do we do it? Let's figure it out. Where do I fit? What's my role? And there's that mentality. It does not happen in corporate America for a lot of people. It can if you're coachable and teachable and all those things. But also in agriculture, we're not super coachable and teachable ourselves. So you have people who are terrible at managing people, and somebody who's always been used to managing people and is now needing to be managed. And it's like this perfect storm of complete shenanigans, tomfoolery that happens. And it's hard. But the question that I ask people all the time is, okay, we're an aging industry. The average age of a rancher in the United States is 60. Most are men. We have an increasing number of female ranchers and farmers, but still not, not even close to even half, right? And young people want to be involved in agriculture in some way. I get messages all the time on LinkedIn from bankers and lawyers and hedge fund people and tech people who are like, I don't want to spend my life making stuff that people don't need. I want to make an impact. What do I do? And I'm like, I honestly don't know, because you can't just dive into ag without having some idea of a production agriculture system. And if you want to piss people off on LinkedIn, just tell them that you can't actually understand production agriculture unless you're in production agriculture. But there are lots of people who are making lots of cool impacts, but it's tough. And we as a beef industry, I can't speak for farming because I'm not a farmer. Also, that's a great way to piss people off on LinkedIn, to say you're not a farmer. And I'm like, but I'm literally not a farmer. It's not a slur. I'm not saying anything bad. I don't know anything about farming. Like, I can barely grow plants in my home. I don't know anything about farm equipment. I can drive a tractor. Like, I can put up hay, but that's not farming because I don't plant it. It's just grass hay. I'm literally just not a farmer. I don't have that skill set. So in ranching, we don't do a super great job. It never fails on LinkedIn if I talk about first generation producers and what we can do. What can we do as a beef industry? You could let somebody run 5 cows on you for free. You could help get somebody started. You could have a program where you donate a heifer to a young producer every year, or to a family. If you have employees, you could give them a cow. That's common among the big guys. It's part of your paycheck, is you receive a heifer every year, and you can choose to eat her or keep her, and grow your own herd. You could allow people to lease some ground from you for half price. Or there's all kinds of ways. You could have interns. You could let people just come work and learn and be helpful. But a lot of people say, oh, I can't do that. I don't have time for that. Our bottom line. Your bottom line is 5 cows. Running somebody else's 5 cows is going to make it so you're not cash flowing. Okay. We have so many things to unpack there. You're doing it wrong, first of all. Second of all, the only way any of us get started is by reaching behind. Bert and I wouldn't be where we are if people hadn't reached behind and pulled us up with them, or spent time to answer our questions, or, like you said, you're from Texas. I love Texans, because there's a culture in Texas of helping other people, and most of our mentors are Texan. We joke, we laugh all the time, because Bert and I everyone thinks we're from Texas, besides how, accepting how we talk, because we both wear big Texas style hats. And that's just because we grew to like them, because everybody that we like wears a 5-inch brim. So guess what? We do too. And that's what we like.
Well, is the resistance then, is it geographical? Is the resistance because of some generational age gap? Or is it the established experience, quote unquote, expert versus the newcomer? What is the barrier there culturally?
It's a scarcity mindset.
Okay.
People in ranching, we have a huge problem with scarcity mindsets, because you tell people, they believe there's not enough to go around. There's only so much land. There's only so many cattle. And that would be true, except that new people are getting into this business all the time. And there's a lot of people who don't want to be in it anymore. So how do we replace them? And a little bit is pride. Sometimes people get pretty precious about their family operations. And on the one hand, I get it. It's something your family has built. You are a multi-generational rancher. But at the same time, your grandfather or great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather didn't build this by being a jackass. More than likely. I mean, maybe he was actually a jackass. I don't know. But somewhere along your family line, people helped each other out. And I think people are afraid. They're afraid of losing their operations, which some of them probably should be afraid, because they're not doing what they need to do to keep them. But I think there's just this there's a community aspect to agriculture for sure if you're in the community, but getting in it is really, really hard. And people are very protective and very wary of outsiders. And I say this and people are like, well, I've always found agriculture to be really, really welcoming. Okay, well, I didn't. I did, I did to a point, obviously, because I'm here. But I've had so many people tell me, like, there's no place for you here. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have people to show me how to do things in the way that I can do them, or understand that I have a different, we all have different skill sets, and I'm not a 6-foot tall man, so I can't actually do lots of things that I have to do them differently. Like we always joke, because I used to carry a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket with me because I'm short. And so those would make those great. Just plunk it down. I can stand on it and do whatever I need. It looks less stupid than carrying a step stool, and then I can carry stuff in it. It's great. But I think there's fear, there's a scarcity mindset, there's a wariness of outsiders, which I understand, because a lot of people don't understand this business, or they're actively trying to. But people are like, the activists, there aren't that many guys. They're just really loud. It's one of those things where people are more afraid of activists than they probably should be, which is the whole point of what the activists do, is to freak people out, right? They're really good at it. But I think it's in what kind of cracks me up is people ask, we're starting this business, we're launching next month, and we are going to be catering to large acreage absentee owners because that's who's going to hire a consultant. And people say, oh, I can't believe, so-and-so is buying this, or Bill Gates, or the Chinese, or whoever. Y'all, this industry was started by foreigners. In the 1800s, it was not Americans who were buying all these ranches. It was mostly British people and Scottish people and, people with absolutely buttloads of money. Charlie Goodnight worked for a Scottish guy. He didn't own it. We named a trail after him. And people forget this, they're like, this is the most American industry. Well, it was started by a bunch of Europeans in Europe, and then I always say too, people, and I have friends who work for really big ranches who experience this too. Oh, that big ranch is buying up more land. They're, I hate when they buy this, or I can't believe. Well, then stop selling your stuff. Stop. Yeah. Ranch better. Make it, we just can't make it work anymore. Why? Can you not make it work because you're not trying to make it work, because you're still doing the same thing that you've done for the last 50 years, and you're not changing, and you're not adapting, and you're not trying anything new, and you're not diversifying your income, and you're still selling calves the same kind, the same way that your great grandpa did? It worked great for him. But markets change and businesses change. And there are so many revenue streams that didn't used to be available to us thanks to the internet. Thanks to companies like Land Trust, which will do hunting. And they say, I can't believe all these people are buying up all this land. Well, quit selling it to them. But at the end of the day, if you're selling your place and a foreign guy or a rich guy is the highest bidder, you're not going to be like, oh, no, we're going to take half so we can sell it to the neighbor across the way. Nobody does that. They're going to sell it to one of these big ranches, Ag Reserves, or which is Deseret or Bill Gates or whoever it is. And people freak out about the Chinese. Most of the foreign-owned land in the United States is owned by Canadians. So we can stop clutching our pearls, everybody. It's Canadians. They're very nice people. I understand Justin Trudeau's a bit of a weirdo, but Canadians in general are nice folks, okay? Okay. So, there's just this. And this isn't everybody, obviously. There's obviously families who are incredibly successful, but all those successful families have changed. They've adapted. They've moved. They've added a different revenue stream. They've harnessed social media. They've started a hunting operation in addition to their ranch. They've done something else. They're not still raising foundation Angus cattle and selling them at a sale barn. They've got some outside, maybe they're a cooperator with somebody. Maybe they've got some value added stuff. Who knows? Like a ranch down the road just converted one of their extra barns into a wedding facility.
Yeah.
And they're still ranching full time, but one of their daughters wanted to be an event planner. She didn't want a ranch. She wanted, and it's like, oh, okay, that works, and it's hard from a first generation producer standpoint because I love this business. I chose it. We chose to live this lifestyle, and it's not easy. There's so many people who are throwing away their family legacy because they're holding on too tight to it, and they don't even see it because they're really precious about it. And it's kind of like, in the what's the word I'm looking for? In the peerage in Britain, they all started losing their money, so they started marrying American heiresses to bring in the money to save their family castle or whatever. I'm not saying we should all go find heiresses to marry, but they realized that they couldn't just stay in their bubble and still have their family legacy. Sometimes to keep your family legacy, you have to decide what's most important. Is the legacy doing things the way you've always done it, or is the legacy your land and your operation and having something to pass on to your kids? I think people get those confused. They say it's the operation and the land and all that, but really what they mean is how we've always done it. This is always how my dad did it. And I speak to a lot of young groups, and the number one question I get from young people who are either starting, but more often going into their family operation is, I want to try something new, but nobody will let me try it. That kid is going to leave. They're going to go find somebody who's going to let them learn and grow and not just be the family grunt forever. And
Is there some element of this, speaking of that kind of resistance to change, is there some element of this, at least with some folks in the industry, where in order to stay competitive, you have to adopt new technologies, and there's a resistance to adopting that technology, or there's a high cost into bringing that technology into the production setting?
I think that's more common in row crop farming because the tech that's available to ranchers, we just don't have very much. You see me talk about tech all the time. Our tech is genetics, and people are very hesitant to adopt new genetics. So if we can't even, we've always bought Angus bulls. Cool, now you have no heterosis. Awesome. Neat. Neat. Now you have no hybrid vigor. Congratulations. That's where I say, may I suggest a Leachman stabilizer bull for all of your breeding needs? I see it most when we're talking about grazing and region and that area. I think there's disconnect on both sides, right? Because lots of people who are deep in the region world don't really understand production agriculture. This is a hot, we're about to offend some people here, Richard. And then people who are involved in production agriculture don't always not understand, but they don't always want to listen to the region. I went to a grazing school, and I get it because we've had many neighbors that have gone to a savory grazing school, and those schools do not teach you everything you need to know to manage an operation. You can manage grass, but grass is one very small component of a working ranch. And there are lots of people in the region space who are a little more forward thinking, who understand this, that there is a disconnect and there's more training that's required. But as soon as you start, mob grazing and intensive grazing and Joel Salatin and Will Harris and multi-species and electric fence, a lot of people are like, nope, you have lost me. And I'm that way a little bit because we've had the privilege of working on many different operations in many different places. And I know what works and what doesn't. And having someone tell me, oh no, this is going to work. Yeah? Is it? Is it going to work? Tell me why it's going to work. Tell me why what I've tried before is not good enough. Tell me about how I'm supposed to do that here. And I'm a fairly open-minded person, but when it comes to someone outside the industry saying, this is how you should do it, which happens all the time on LinkedIn, you should be I mean, the most common one is electric fence. You guys should have electric fence and be moving cattle daily. Friend, our pastures, we have pastures that are bigger than the entire White Oaks operation. Because Will Harris, I've talked to him, he's a lovely man. He gets 50 inches of rain a year. You know, so everything is condensed. We can't run these ranches. This ranch is 70,000 acres. Like, you can't. I mean, in Georgia, 70,000 acres would be 70,000 cows, right? Here it's 1,000. Yay. So we can't do things the same way. So I think it's more, instead of tech, AI is going to be the exception to that rule. Once we start with blockchain and data sharing and databases, the data sharing is very difficult for beef producers. That's going to be our biggest hurdle, I think, as far as hard tech goes. But it's the mindsets and it's the disconnect in the language that we have. And it's the understanding that just because somebody says this works everywhere doesn't mean it actually works everywhere. Like, we can't run hogs behind our cows. Are you kidding? Like, we don't see our cows. They're there existing in the world. And yeah, obviously we ride through them a couple times a week to make sure everybody's fine. And in calving, we see them a lot more, but in the summer, we might see them once or twice a week if they choose to let us see them, right? If they're not hiding in the trees or something. So we can't really do that multi-species thing. We can't do electric fence. So what can we do? You know, and that's where I think a lot of producers get hung up is, what can we do? Because yeah, we can't do that, but what can we do? And they get so stuck in, this is what we do. We can't do anything else. Okay, like, hang with me. I'm not saying you need to go and have 600 miles of electric fence. I hate electric fence because we have elk who also don't give a hoot about barbed wire fence, but at least I know a barbed wire fence. I know where the hole is. I don't have to go find why it's not hot anymore. But like, maybe we could try a rotation. Maybe we could change your calving season. Oh boy, you tell ranchers to change their calving season. Like, it's like you just told them to go slap their mother. Like, what? Why are you calving in January in Montana? We've always calved in January. Yeah, and you've always hated your life for 3 months of the year. And like, almost like, there's mental health issues that happen because people calve in January. It's miserable. But they say, well, but you know, our buyer needs us to calve in January. You can't get another buyer. There's no other buyers. There's never been another buyer. There's nobody who wants to buy calves in November. No, none. No people exist. Strange, we have a couple. But maybe they only but like us. I don't know, maybe we're just special that way. And I get sarcastic about it because that's just my defense mechanism. But it's really frustrating because people say, well, we can't do that. Why? Why not? Especially when it's adapt and change or lose the damn ranch. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, I recognize I don't have a ranch because that's the number one thing people are like, well, you wouldn't understand. Well, you wouldn't understand not having a permanent home and moving your kids around and working for people who don't know how to manage other people. So I think it's less of an adoption of tech than it is different methods of doing what you already do. And then there is, you know, people are going to want our data. Gathering data is incredibly challenging, as I talk about all the time. All these fancy systems, a lot of them don't actually work in real life, or they only work in certain environments.
And you almost killed your laptop the other day, I think.
It was close. It was, I mean, I almost threw the damn thing and got out my legal pad because I was about to throw a fit. That system that we used at that ranch was pretty bad, though. I'm not saying what it was or where we worked for, because if you knew either one of those things, you'd be able to tell who it was and what the system was. But and there is a company I'm going to be talking to see if their database might work well for us. A lot of the databases, and collection systems do way more than a commercial guy needs. Like everyone's telling me, you need AgriWeb. I don't want to track our pasture movements on a computer. Well, I don't need that. I don't care. You know, we don't need that. And people are like, well, how do you know about the biomass and your grass? I'm like, because we have eyes, and that works really well for us. And I don't mean to be sarcastic, because AgriWeb is a really cool platform. It's just has way too many bells and whistles. And we aren't looking for a grass management database. We're looking for something where I can literally enter in an inventory and have preg check dates and condition scores and be able to keep track of, has this cow looked this bad forever? Or is this new? You know, like, do we need to call her? Does she get one more chance? Or, you know, wow, this cow always looks terrible, but she weaned a 600-pound calf this year, so she gets to stay, or, you know, whatever it is. They do. Go ahead.
Are these like medical records on the cows? Is that what you're tracking?
Sort of. It's mostly, I want to know, and this is mostly for my brain, because I love data. I would love, so registered places, because of all the data that registration, like registered Angus, registered Hereford, they require enormous quantities of data. They want weaning weights, yearling weights. A lot of them want cow weights sometimes, or we just take them anyway because they're standing in the chute. They want tons and tons of stuff. I want to know, first of all, we need to know if she's bred, right? We need to know her preg check record. As far as my husband is concerned, if she ever comes up open, she doesn't live here anymore. Not everybody runs it that way. They probably should. Lots of cattlemen hold on to their cows like they're family members. They are not. They have to earn their keep. But I want to know, for me, if we could get a weight on every cow and a weight on every calf, I would be thrilled, because I want to know the percentage of the body weight she is weaning. My husband will never want to do that. So what I want to do is have a system where we can, like, our own scoring system to say, how is she looking? What do we notice about her? You know, if we notice, if Bert's out checking cows and he notices she just has an absolutely beautiful calf, I want to have a place to put that in. And then I want it to track it every single year, so I can go back and see, oh, 492 always looks a little rough, but man, she brings home a beautiful calf. Or 642's udder's getting a little iffy. We need to make sure to look at that next year. And mostly it's to increase the quality of this cow herd. We've culled really, really hard on this cow herd, but we have an owner who's a corporate guy, and I think having a spreadsheet with progress, you know, look, we had, 400 score 8s last year. This year we have 600. The quality of our cow herd is increasing, and then we can take our calf weights and our calf prices and build him a spreadsheet. Most ranchers don't even do that. A lot of them don't even keep track of who is bringing home a really bad calf every year, because you notice the bad ones. Even if you don't tag calves, you notice which cows are raising a dink every year. And that bottom end, we need to bring the bottom to the middle. That is the way our cow herds are going to improve. And that's where uniformity and all that comes in. But without a way to track it, you can't improve. You can't improve what you can't measure, right? And yes, we would all do better if we were measuring, because we want, you want a cow to wean 50% of her body weight or more. And obviously there's a roof there, and where you live depends, that's your calf weights are going to be depending on where you live and how you feed them and all that stuff. But, and your cow size, right? Where we live, I would like to see a more moderate size cow raising a pretty good size calf, at least a 5 weight when we wean. And then we feed them and hopefully get them up to a 6. And we've improved our weaning weights. I think we're up 60 pounds over 2 years. Maybe 75 this year. I'll have to go look at our numbers. But that's what I want. And that's what that personally, I think that's the bare minimum that producers should have. They should have an inventory. They should be keeping track of their cow's condition, and they should be making notes of the superstars and the ones that are just that don't need to live there anymore. And their ages. We need to keep track of who's getting too old. But a lot of producers don't even do that. And there's really not a great database for that. They want them to be more complicated. They want them to have, EADs and weights and feed efficiency and grazing information and GPS tags. And it's like, there's a couple brand databases that people recommended. And I'm like, I know how much their ear tags cost. Nope. Like, it is a hard sell to get this owner to pay $1.25 for engravable Richie tags. He is not going to pay $10, $20, $30 for a really fancy GPS tag. And we don't need it. We don't need that level of monitoring. And one of my wonders in my brain is, are we getting that more of that kind of tech because we have more techie people coming into ag and ranching and and fewer cattlemen? Because a lot of cattlemen are like, I don't need you to tell me if my grass is too short. Like, I don't need you to tell me how many days on feed. I don't need you to tell me where my cows are. I know where they are. I don't need you to tell me if she's sick. I think there are some applications in a feed yard setting for some of those animal health tracking devices, because you're managing so many cattle, and it would be lovely to know pen 4, calf 1712 probably has pneumonia. Let's go take care of that. And that would be great for us too, knowing, oh, so-and-so stopped moving around. She's probably hurt her foot or whatever it is. But at the same time, the cost for a feed yard, the revenue is there. For us, it's not, even though if you have feed yards have super tight margins, but it makes sense for them to be able to quickly treat animals from a revenue standpoint. For us, cows on range just don't get sick as much. Weaned calves do, but we usually have them in a smaller area so we can see them anyway. But
it's a strange clash of cultures.
It is.
Right. Well, you have those who are staunch in their position and resistant to the newcomers. However, there's an element of credibility there, because perhaps some of the newcomers are coming with information that's not even relevant to how they should be managing or how they have managed historically. However, perhaps they need some adaptability there as well.
Yeah,
right?
And we need new ideas. We need people who are excited about the future of this business. But we also need everybody to start listening to one another. We don't do, I'm about to deliver a talk next month about inheritance and transition and communication. And you start talking about communication to a group of ranchers, and they're like, nope. Okay, we have to talk about it. We have to, because Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they communicate completely differently than Gen X and the boomers, right? And I hear all the time, I can't find anybody to work. Nobody wants to work. Okay, do they not want to work, or do they not want to work for you? Because I have seen how some of y'all manage your places, and I don't want to work for you either. On the flip side, though, you get Gen Alpha and mostly Gen Z right now, and they're just they get offended by a lot of things. They have their way of communicating, and they need to grow up just a little bit. So you have these people saying, nobody wants to work. They're all soft. And then you have this younger generation saying, you guys are all really mean, and you don't take time for yourselves, and you work too much. And they're both right. They're both right. Yeah, they're both right. So how do we, and you have to remember too, in ranching, even if you go to school for ranching, unless you are going to like the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management, you are not learning people management skills. So, and leadership is actually just code for communication, right? And management is often just code for communication. So if you are actually not a very adept people manager, whether you are managing your family or an outside staff, things are never going to run as well as you would like, because everyone is not on the same page. People are, that's why we have such a high turnover in ranching. Some of it is because it's just a hard business. And a lot of the time you can't advance, you can't move up unless you go somewhere else and get a better job and a better role. But a lot of it is because the owner or the boss is a complete dick. Like, I mean, the things that have been screamed at me by people, like, I can't imagine yelling some of the things that have been yelled at me that I mean, I realize we're cussing a bit on this podcast. These are words that we cannot say. They're like $5 cuss words, not quarter cuss words at like a 22-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that make the 22-year-old girl do? It makes her cry, and then it makes her hate you, and then it makes her quit. And then it makes her never talk to you again because she's got some trauma. Okay. And of course, people listen to like, oh, trauma. Oh, you guys talk about trauma. Some of this is actually traumatic, how you guys treat each other. And the conditions are terrible, and we're not getting paid anything. And there's this is like this snowball effect.
And it's not isolated to this industry. It's just the factor that some people are dicks.
Yeah. And I think with this industry, you throw in the low pay, the hard work, the long hours, the distance from town, the houses that are often available, and it's too much. It's too much. So like we have a kind of friend, and he was kind of saying, I can't keep anybody. I can't get anybody to work here. I don't know what I'm, this, and he's just kind of complaining like a lot of ranchers like to do. And I said, what are you paying them, dude? And they've just increased, I forget what it is, they've increased the minimum pay for a ranch hand or agricultural worker. I think it's like $26.50 a month, which is a fairly standard, like it's way more than I got paid. But he was paying people the bare minimum, asking them to drive around in a truck that's older than I am. Right. And I realized, guys, there's some really good old trucks. This was not one of those. This was a truck that should have seen the junkyard like upon my entry into high school, which was longer ago than I would care to admit. And he had him living in basically a shack of a house. And I was like, no wonder you can only get drunks and idiots to work for you, because this is not an environment that is conducive to people who are of quality. I don't want to say quality because that implies other people aren't, but there, if you have poor conditions, you're going to get a certain kind of person who wants to work for you, and you're never going to get a family. You're going to get a single guy who isn't going to stay very long because that's not what they do. That's not how this industry works. You stay until you don't want to anymore, and then you go get another job that's hopefully slightly better, but a lot of guys just want to ride their horses and take care of cattle, and they don't have any loyalty to people who don't treat them well.
If you don't invest in your employees' future, then your business doesn't have a future, and it's what you get, what you pay for.
But then we go back to that scarcity mindset. I'm worried about my own future, so how can I be invested in theirs? Rising tides, guys, rising tides. Lift all the boats. And if we don't have another group, so, our goal, because people always ask us, I promise there's a point. I know I switched gears. People say, well, don't you guys kind of feel gross about catering to absentee owners? And I'm like, no, because I want to keep ranches ranching. Whatever we need to do, I want to keep ranches ranching. I want to keep ranches in ranching production. I don't want them to be developed. I don't want them to be plowed under. I am thinking of the long game of open space and wildlife habitat and a future for my children if they want to be in this business. And if we have to have a ranching industry that is predominantly owned, right now, guys, it's still 98% of farms and ranches are family owned. So if the family lives and works there, is that really that important? Because like the ranch we work for, the family doesn't live here, but my family lives here and 2 other families live here. So like, is it really that bad if the money is a town guy who has very little to do with the operation? I don't think so. I really don't, because that's how we started. That's where this industry, that's the foundation of this industry, was rich guys who hired other more competent ranch managers. And that's our goal, is there's a lot of incompetent ranch managers, and we want to help foster more professional C-suite level ranch management. because there is a difference between a guy that manages a ranch and a really, really solid ranch manager. And if we can get these really big ranches to be run better, not all of them are run poorly, obviously. I can name probably 20 that are run very, very well. Some of them are terrible to work for. Small industry, but they're run really well from an operations standpoint. But a lot of them are run really poorly because absentee owners, they don't know the difference. They don't know how to hire. They don't know what a successful year is. They don't understand commodity markets. Like, it's a whole separate skill set. So if we can provide the resources for really top quality C-suite professional level management, we're going to see these, and the difference between us, because there's lots of ranch management consulting firms. We want to make these ranches really good places to work, because that is something that is missing. And we have been through it enough with our own family that, we are notoriously terrible people managers in this industry. We have incredibly high turnover, incredibly high attrition. It's difficult to find people to work because we suck at managing people. And we think we can make it better. So we're starting a business. But at the end of the day, we just want ranches to keep ranching. We want them to be, whether or not they change owners, we want them to be heritage properties and assets. We want to keep ranches like this, that we have a subdivision on one side and national forest on the other. And that's what we want. We want to keep these buffers and these places where animals get to live. And, we have all the ecosystem services and carbon and soil and water and all those things. We also want to keep the cowboy lifestyle. There's a lot of people who don't understand or appreciate the cowboy lifestyle, which, of course, is not mutually exclusive with being a cattleman or a rancher or a ranch manager. You can be a cowboy too. But we see lots of people coming into this business who don't really care about tradition. And that's a bummer, because there's lots of really good tradition. And one of the posts I wrote that I upset lots of people. I used branding. I shouldn't have used branding. That was such a rookie mistake, as a representation of when we do things traditionally, because it's the way that works the best. But we use horses because it works the best. We still brand cattle because it works. It's the only permanent visual ID. I need to be able to tell from horseback if that's my cow or not. And ear tabs don't cut it because they fall out. EIDs don't cut it because I can't read that with my eyes. And when somebody comes up with a better solution, we're all for it. But right now, nobody has. We still move cattle horseback because that's the best way. We still rope and doctor because for us, that is the best way. Is it traditional? Yes. But it's also, we've tried other things, and that's what we keep coming back to. And sometimes people do traditional things because it's fun. But other times, like the Bell Ranch in New Mexico, they still take a wagon to brand, because when you ranch on 300,000 acres, it is actually way more expeditious to have a wagon and a wagon cook and a whole bunch of guys in teepees. That's the best way. It's the fastest way. And guess what? Those guys in teepees are loving it. My husband uses his range teepee any chance that he gets. And then, I get a lot of family ranchers who talk to me and they're like, I'm so concerned about tradition. How do we pass on these traditions? You're the one. We're first generation producers, and we're very traditional in how we do things, but also very progressive. I love tech. I love tech when it works, because the people who brought us up in this business taught us how to do things that way. And so now we're teaching our kids to do things that way, And so we need to have ownership of our future in the beef business. I tell my audiences that all the time. We no longer have the luxury of putting our hands up and tapping out. If you want to have a business, a beef industry, an agriculture industry that you are proud to be a part of, that you want for your kids and your grandkids and their grandkids, then you have to get involved in whatever way that looks for you. I'm not saying you have to go get on social media. Actually, that's probably one of the least effective things you could do if you're thinking about how to raise up the next generation. My focus is different. But we have to take ownership of our own future. No one's coming to save us. I think that's been the mentality for a long time is someone's going to figure this out. Are they, though? I think we can. I think we're the best people to figure it out, and we're a very independent, resourceful bunch. So I have hope. We got to learn how to communicate, guys. Let's do some self-reflection, some personal development, some inner work, be a little woo, and it'll all work out.
Well, Cassidy, your calls to action are loud and clear. And you did mention briefly that you have a speaking engagement here in January. So let's give the proper plug for that event, and then we'll get on down the road.
Well, that one is the Colorado Farm Show, but I also happen to be speaking at CattleCon this year. I'm really excited. That's our biggest conference, NCBA convention. They are so kind, and I get to speak about ranch management and first generation producers along with another ranch management expert. It's one of those times when I'm like, are you sure that I'm your person? Okay, all right, we'll do it. And speaking is not, my bread and butter, but I really, really love to talk to audiences, especially non-ag audiences, about beef production. But yeah, I'll be speaking about transition at the Colorado Farm Show in Greeley at the end of January, and then I'll be going to NCBA. And I don't know, an Australian guy is having me speak virtually in March at his event. So I'll share that on my LinkedIn too. I just started getting details about that. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. This was such a fun, rambly, sorry guys, conversation. We just Joe Rogan did it.
Well, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for joining. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to watching you progress and learning more about the industry. Thank you for your voice.
Thank you.
This episode of Blue Sky is sponsored by Parabolic. Parabolic is dedicated to growing wealth together through business and organizational development services designed by conducting a rigorous workshop with your business leaders. Are you a small to medium-sized business needing to grow into new markets? Or have you grown too rapidly and now need to unwind some of the damage? There is no cookie-cutter template to solve your unique issues. There is no step-by-step proprietary method these other consultants claim for high fees. Parabolic focuses specifically on your unique challenges in a one-on-one setting to dive deeply into the issues, to develop a list of action items and next steps. And if we can help with those steps, we'll talk about it. No strings, no BS. Visit parabolic-strategy.com today to contact us. PARABOLIC-strategy.com. Let's go vertical.